Hi, I'm George Dahl. Welcome back to my film journal. Today, I spoke with Maarek from the Good Old Boyz Podcast about the wonderful 1993 dystopian sci-fi thriller Demolition Man, starring Sylvester Stallone as the intrepid police officer John Spartan, locked in a battle across time with his diametrically opposed force, Simon Phoenix, played by Wesley Snipes. In the film's opening sequence, Spartan and Phoenix do battle in Phoenix's Los Angeles lair, when disaster strikes and Spartan is sentenced to cryo-freeze for manslaughter along with his archenemy. But both are awoken in the utopian future of San Angeles in the 21st century, a society that is idyllic, but there might be something that lies beneath the surface. The city is run by Raymond Cocteau, a villainous leader who is willing to unleash Phoenix and bring him back in order to strike fear into the hearts of the citizenry in his war against Dennis Leary and his ragtag group of sewer denizens who refuse to conform to the idyllic utopian society of Cocteau. The earnest, good-hearted police officers break glass for John Spartan, bringing him back knowing that he was the only person who ever defeated Phoenix those many years ago. It's a terrific movie, and I had a great time speaking with Maarek. The Good Old Boyz Show is a really interesting political podcast. They talk a lot about history and Julius Caesar. They're big fans of a patronage angle of politics, and they introduced an alternative reading of history for characters like Huey Long or Boss Tweed. It's a really interesting show, and Maarek told me before we started that this is his favorite movie. So without further ado, let's get started. But first, I'd like to say that Maarek and I had a really wonderful conversation. I cut this video review down to about an hour, but we went for about 2+. So what I plan to do, because I hope to continue to do these long-form interviews, I'm launching a podcast, a film journal podcast, which will feature audio versions of extended interviews that I have, just in case people don't want to hang on for a 2-hour-long YouTube video. There's now audio versions of my work. So guys, I'll be releasing that in the next couple of days, but for the time being, I had a great time speaking with Maarek about Demolition Man. Let's get started. All right, Maarek, thanks for coming on. My question to you is, I've heard, you told me this movie is your favorite movie. Now, do you think ideology plays into that, or do you think it's just, for your money, the most entertaining thing that you've seen?
Well, somebody asked me my favorite movie a while back on the podcast. I was like, if you're going by how many times I've seen it, it's got to be Demolition Man. And that's kind of when it comes to entertainment products, that has to be on the list. If you've watched this movie 15 times over the course of your life, as for the ideology, I think that I watched the movie when I was a child. And I loved the movie then, and I loved the movie, my whole life. But I think that, like, in the last, let's say, 8 to 10 years, the appreciation of the movie for the themes has really, like, made it pop out. Like, there's so many things that happen in this movie that probably people who've never seen it, you would just assume this is like, the typical Sylvester Stallone 90s.
It's
schlock, like Judge Dredd, yeah,
like Judge Dredd, right?
But it's not. For one thing, it was written by the guy who wrote Heathers, and I think also the Andrew Dice Clay movie, which he probably wouldn't want to take credit for that one. But like, if you've ever seen the movie Heathers, and I'm sure that people who listen to this podcast probably have, like, that guy knows how to write a script, and like this script was really good. It's not just it is a dumb action movie, but it's not just a dumb action movie.
It's far more clever and satirical than I think you would give it credit for if you saw it on the Blockbuster shelf, right?
Oh, yeah.
Stallone and Wesley Snipes, mano a mano, Demolition Man. You wouldn't expect, the level of, like, just clever little bits they have in the film that are just, like, totally quotable and really iconic. Like the swearing machine that gives you a ticket every time you say a bad word.
Throughout the whole movie, it's just like a running joke in the background.
Where the goddamn guns?
You are fined 1 credit for a violation of the verbal morality statute.
Fuck you.
When the movie starts, like, it's a sci-fi movie. If you just walk into the movie not knowing what it's about, like, it could be confusing. It's kind of a convoluted plot, but what they, like, there's no crawl at the beginning like this is words, like Star Wars or whatever. They don't need to explain it to you. What happens is you see L.A. and everything's on fire. It's like L.A. 1995, and like you're like, yeah, okay. In '93, yeah, L.A. could look like that from 3 years from now. I get that. And then the part where he gets arrested, and then the next like exposition scene is they just have the warden and he's reading the charges and like, here's what's going to happen. Here's your sentence. And it's like really organic, right? There's nobody spewing out exposition at you. It moves along at a really great pace.
Yeah, it's really compact storytelling, and they dole out information well. And you're right, it's a great script. Like in the way where the movie introduces a lot of interesting ideas, like the idea that you get taught things while you're in cryo freeze that like manifest when you get out. So there are like interesting moments like when Stallone starts knitting and you're kind of thinking like, what? But it's a great way to explain things.
Yeah, in that scene that I was talking about, he's doing the super fast typing and he's surprised. He doesn't know how he knows how to do this. I think that you hit something great there. Like the idea of the cryo prison is great because it's like it's the ultimate symbol of you don't know how to deal with antisocial people. Like in the movie, they list the prisoners, and Wesley Snipes has looked at the list, and like Jeffrey Dahmer's in the cryo prison. And
I didn't notice that.
What that means is that somebody put Jeffrey Dahmer into the cryopod and think, if we just teach him how to like basket weave for like 50 years, we can turn Jeffrey Dahmer into like a guy who wears a kimono and eats a Taco Bell. Like we can handle this. We can nudge him exactly where like, which is an utterly ridiculous idea. Like when at the end of the movie when they blow up the cryo prison, Stallone's like, trust me, this is you're going to be way better off without this thing. Because like how would that work? How would you reform Jesse Ventura and the gang of sci-fi rapists and murderers? Like, what are you going to program into their brains that they'll turn them into like lawyers and social workers? I was thinking about this before we came on. Like, if you read Brave New World, or you read 1984, or you watch Escape from L.A., nobody walks out of the theater or puts down the book and says, well, there were some good parts of that place. I would like to live there. I could imagine two people walking out of the theater to see Demolition Man in 1993, and one saying, man, thank God we don't live there, and the other person saying, well, Stallone really screwed up. That seemed like a much better place than we live. And like that's one way that you can make a good movie.
Obviously, we don't like the San Angeles of 2015, I believe, in the movie because it is based upon a lie. The Raymond Cocteau, who was kind of like the proto Klaus Schwab, he even dresses like him. Right?
Yes.
But that was the thing I was going to ask you next. Is when you watch the movie, besides the fact that it's all built upon a lie and sort of fake, and everybody is obviously far too docile and brainwashed. What about the world, in your opinion, is bad? Why would that be a bad future?
Okay, well, to talk about the future that they envision in the movie, you got to understand, like, they got a lot of things right, but, like, even they weren't cynical enough to imagine that the LA police would not investigate murders while they were, called out for vandalism, or, somebody said too many swears. Like, if you say in the movie, if you say 2 swear words, the police get dispatched to come, I guess, once they arrest you or talk to you or whatever. But in the movie, there's basically no real crime. They hadn't had a murder for, I think they said like 30 years, something like that. Like in that sense, you're kind of cheating in the script by doing that. Like that's so far science fiction, it's unbelievable. But you have for the movie to work, that has to be true. The problem here is the Raymond Cocteau world. The problems with it is like that. Obviously, it's built on lies, but not just that. Like he's not subtle about it, but in the movie he just says, I'm trying to behaviorally modify everybody to just do exactly what I want.
I'll have carte blanche to create the perfect society. My society. San Angeles will be a beacon of order with the purity of an ant colony.
And the stuff about order and a clean society, they're all incidental. They're not really the goal. And you know that because he unleashes an absolute maniac to terrorize his own people so that he can get carte blanche to chase Dennis Leary out of the sewers because he's robbing the Taco Bell or something. Like it's absolutely. There's a great scene near the start of the movie where, like, Wesley Snipes is already running amok. He's kung fu fighting police officers, he's blowing up police cars. He's killed like 5 people already, and they cut to Raymond Cocteau, and he's in like the proto-Zune meeting in 1993, where he's talking to these like robot, like these like little iPads with people's faces on it. He's like, hey, look, the biggest problem that we have in society right now are these hobos who live in the sewer eating Taco Bell leftovers. Don't worry, I'm going to take care of that. And meanwhile, somebody's like, just absolutely running amok in the city. Like, for him, that's genuinely the way it is, because it's purely society built where he has to have total control over every human being. Like, that's the main problem.
That is an absolutely spectacular, great point that I had never thought of. But you're right. He's like, I will not rest until every chud is eliminated from my dream society here. Like, it's not enough that you win and you have power. It's like everyone must be commanded to like the same thing. They would have to like listening to commercials on FM radio as pop music.
This is the most popular station in town. Wall-to-wall mini tunes. You call them commercials.
Here's that classic you've all been waiting for. The #1 request of the day. Armor hot dogs.
Kids eat Armor hot dogs.
Oh, wow. This is my fave.
Yeah, the Armor hot dogs jingle is the top 40 Billboard music hit. That was such a great, like, that seemed ridiculous where like they're in the car and they're singing the Armor hot dog jingles and like cat chow, whatever. And it's like you in '93 that seemed absurd. It's like, today, no, I could see that. Like with social media, yeah, I could definitely see an influencer TikToking themselves singing along with the Armor hot dog song.
And I think especially what's resonant today too is like the intervention of technology and like social mores.
Yeah.
And regulation into sex as well, right? To like commodify it and make sure that it's like as safe and as like, procedural as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. The way they treat sex in the movie is really weird because the future is like this new age, the 90s new age utopia, right? And today you would think, well, if we had that world, like everybody would what we have now. Like you have Tinder, everybody would be going buck wild, but it's not like that. You're not. It's literally illegal to have sex with someone. You have to use a VR headset and like and jack in to
yeah.
She and Sandra Bullock invites Stallone back to her apartment, and like they're going to seal the deal, and he expects them to have sex, and she says, no, it's illegal. You got to put on this VR headset. He doesn't like that. He's like, nah, let's just do it the old-fashioned way. And she is physically repulsed by the idea. And then she goes this monologue where she goes, well, after AIDS there was NRS, and after that there was OBT, and she's like, in the future after '93 there were these crazy deadly STDs, so it was not safe to have sex with people anymore. And if you in the context of the movie '93, you were taught, like, if you have unprotected sex, like if you're just like a regular man, woman, reproductive sex, you're going to get AIDS and you're going to die. Like right. that was pretty much the doctrine. And I think in '93 that was believable. Now it seems kind of ridiculous because, well, society's definitely moved on from that fear. I don't think that unprotected sex is quite the taboo that it was back then. But like, I think that you have to understand that to get why that scene might have been less funny in '93 than it was to us. Sorry, what was your?
No, or at least it would sort of make sense in terms of like a continuum of history, right? I think it's funnier now from a more of if you're looking at it from like a Me Too perspective, yeah. Right? Because sort of all ambiguity is removed from sex when it becomes like a purely consensual thing of like, here, you put your helmet on and I'll put my helmet on, right?
Yeah, like sign the user agreement before we go
exactly.
further.
So, terms of service, 100%.
It's funny because like everything about the movie points to like the people are infantilized, right? You're for one thing, look at how the men dress in the movie. Every man either dresses like a baby in a kimono, or like there's some guys who dress kind of like a matador. But there's no, you never say like, oh look, that's cool. Aside from the police uniforms with the Jack Brown or whatever brown belt, they look cool. But everybody else, just every other man looks like an absolute pud in the film.
Yeah, yeah. Would you want to live in the Dennis Leary sewer, or would you, out of principle?
I mean, this is kind of like when Aldous Huxley wrote Brave New World, it was kind of like the choice, right? You could go off and live with the savages on the reservation and be dirty and unhappy, or you could, be a miserable miserable drone like Omega or whatever. I mean, I guess the hard answer would be, yeah, I'd rather live in the sewers, but nah, probably not. I'd put on the kimono, whatever, The sci-fi element of the movie is not like that there's a cryo prison or all this stuff. Like, the sci-fi element is that it works. Like everybody, like, if you go by the logic of the movie, his behavioral programming works on like 99.9% of people. Everybody just goes along with it. You outlaw sex, hey, no problem. We'll just cyber each other and FedEx our bodily fluids to Dr. Fauci to mix them up and get the baby. Like, so I mean, I'd like to say that, but I mean, no. I don't live off the grid today. I'm talking to you right now through the internet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I could see the lead up articles like right now, like, hey, you never really even liked sex that much to begin with. It was never even that great. So what are you complaining? Right? Like, isn't that the way they handle basically everything now? You never liked beef. Come on, beef sucked. You can overcook it, right? Try these bugs. But no, I think the movie is really... I think it's great. I think there's a reason why it holds up and it's prescient. I think your point about the idea that Cocteau, like the fact that he created a world without violence, was sort of a byproduct of the fact that really what he wanted to do is just control people. And the best way to control people, I guess, is to give them domesticity, to make things peaceful so that they don't complain. And I think in the 1990s, the economy was good. Things were going well when people were pushing social and political change. Everyone kind of took it because they weren't starving. And I think now the people in charge are making a bad miscalculation that they're trying to push too much when they have not, and you guys have talked about this on your show, where they're not giving you the treats. The treats aren't flowing. So they need to slow their roll and get back to like providing what they're basically there to do. And this is a fatal miscalculation for them, perhaps, do you think?
There are aspects of the movie that are like that perfectly mesh with reality. Like, okay, in the movie, everything is like, it's like a technocratic dream, right? Even the police operate off this almost no explicitly robotic. Like, okay, here for example, in the scene where Wesley Snipes is fighting off the entire like half of the LAPD by himself, the cops don't know what to do. They have a little iPad and they ask him like, how do I get this? How do I arrest this guy? And he goes, you need to tell the subject to put his hands up. And it's like, and then he won't, and then she goes, tell the subject to put his hands up, or else. And it's like a running joke. Like the chief consults the computer, and like the computer's always wrong. It can never predict what Wesley Snipes is going to do. It's a world that only functions if everyone is obeying the rules. I don't think that in real life they could even accomplish that if they had absolute power over everybody. They couldn't do it. For one thing, they're just not the good enough people. Like the chief, I mean, obviously the Raymond Cocteau is a bad guy and stuff, but the chief, those people, they're not bad people. They're genuinely gentle, nice people who have they want people to be happy and healthy. I don't think the people who rule over us want that at all. I think they actually they hate us. Like, you don't ever see Sandra Bullock doesn't hate the sewer people. They think they're gross and sad. Like our leaders look at us like Raymond Cocteau looks at Dennis Leary. They want us dead, frankly.
I just fundamentally think that whoever is leading the country now, they just, whatever their conception of the good life is not copacetic with what I think. right? Like, I don't know. I really have a hard time wrapping my head around like what kind of world they want to live in. You know, and I'm trying to figure out if they propagate misery because they think that they can benefit from it, and then they can live in Chappaqua or whatever in their gated community, and they think they can last it out, or if they actually.
That's a perfect lead in, because this is like, I'll redirect this question by talking about the movie again, right? So in the movie, like, are you familiar? It's been talked about a lot like in the last few months, especially on Twitter and you know, in articles, places like Compact, the Machiavellian concept of the lion and the fox.
Yes.
The lion is the lead, like in Machiavelli, the lion is, you know, the nobles who are literally military guys. Like, their job is to fight. They rule by the sword. They use physical force to maintain their power. The foxes are like this, you know, the administrators. They're the clever people. They're the rules lawyer. They rule that way. Like in this movie, the leader of the Raymond Cocteau guy, he is the ultimate fox. He's like the fox personified. He controls people by nudging them, by putting them into machines that like literally rewrite their brain. And he gets the idea. Well, here's how I can get total control. I could take this maniac, program him to be an even bigger maniac, and just set him loose. And then people will get so scared they'll do whatever I want. But the problem with that is, because he's such a fox, he can't even imagine the idea that like he would unfreeze this guy and just instantly kill him. Because Wesley Snipes is not just a maniac. He is a lion. And he tells you this in the very beginning of the movie. Some of the first lines he has, he's talking to Stallone, because he's in his like South Central LA fortress that like, he is cordoned off. He said, you know, I told the city, nobody comes down here. The police, nobody. This is my territory. I own this place. This is mine.
See, I told the city, I said, look, nobody comes down here. Postmen figured it out. Policemen figured it out. But the goddamn bus drivers just wouldn't listen.
Like, that is not what a maniac does. That's someone who, like, they're interested in power. And as soon as he gets out, he schemes on, like, how do I unfrost my friends and take over this? I want to take over this whole thing. And the reason what I'm trying to get at here is what your original question was. Well, why do we have police abolition? Why do we have, when murder rates are climbing, cities have more violent crime than they have in a long time? We're approaching 90s levels of violence again, but they're not reversing course. They're just accelerating this, because they are foxes and they cannot conceive of any situation where physical force can be used against them. Right? They just, to them, this is just a tool, and they can, all the people who are committing these murders and rapes in real life, they can be called up to raise hell when it's convenient for them, and then put back into the cupboard and save for later. But reality doesn't work that way, and that's what they literally can't understand. That's what I think anyway.
That is a brilliant way to answer the question, and that's terrific. I mean, that's 100% right. Because one of the questions I had about this movie is that I thought initially watching it, it's sort of a buffet of dystopian fiction. Yeah. But I don't think that it's an explicitly right-wing movie.
No, absolutely not. Like Dennis Leary's famous rant is it's literally just his stand-up, and that's like the most right. Like classically liberal thing possible. He says, I should be able to do whatever I want because I feel like it.
I'm the enemy because I like to think. I like to read. I'm into freedom of speech and freedom of choice. I'm the kind of guy who likes to sit in a greasy spoon and wonder, gee, should I have the T-bone steak or the jumbo rack of barbecue ribs with the side order gravy fries? I want high cholesterol. I want to eat bacon and butter and buckets of cheese, okay? I want to smoke a Cuban cigar the size of Cincinnati in the non-smoking section. I want to run through the streets naked with green jello all over my body reading Playboy magazine. Why? Because I suddenly might feel the need to, okay, pal? I've seen the future. You know what it is? It's a 47-year-old virgin sitting around in his beige pajamas drinking a banana broccoli shake singing, I'm an Oscar Mayer wiener. You live up top, you live Cocteau's way. What he wants, when he wants, how he wants. Your other choice, come down here, maybe starve to death.
Which, you know, in the 90s, that made sense. I think that we've progressed now, 30 years later, it's like where we can see perhaps letting people do whatever they want is not a good idea. But it's a time it made sense, you know.
He's like a Howard Stern libertarian, like a 90s Howard Stern.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
thumbing his nose at the religious right who wanted to cancel his show, right?
Yeah, and where's Stern now?
Oh my God, yeah.
The blue and
Irrelevant.
non-live.
I
Whenever
know.
it comes out of the woodwork, he's just like, it's hilarious. Yeah, but you know, that's just the way that goes.
What a shame, because I mean, I really liked that movie, Private Parts, the movie they made about his.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's a little strain of 90s comedies there, like Wayne's World and that were just, you know, great little media deconstruction movies that were just great. But yeah, what a shame for Howard Stern. But I think you can look at the Dennis Leary character, and he is sort of like an anti. You can see him as like an anti-PC character now, possibly.
Which one? Who?
Dennis Leary character in the movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like, he was explicitly that way. That was pretty much Dennis Leary's assigned role in every movie until I guess he got his TV show, right? That was just what you would haul him out to. Like there's a crappy movie that he did with like Kevin Spacey, I think, where he's like he's this criminal who's dealing with upper class people, and he takes their bourgeoisie norms and he deflates them, and he like, I just want to. He's always the same guy. He's always like that. I want a T-bone steak and a Hustler magazine, and that's just who he was in the '90s. And it was like it made sense. It was like that was a genre character back then.
Can we talk about the movie's aesthetics a little bit, if you wouldn't mind?
Hell
Unless
yeah.
you have performances. We talked about Sylvester Stallone. I think he's a really captivating star. I've always really liked him and rooted for him in his projects. I think the movies he makes are fundamentally like really positive. I think one of his best movies that if someone were to ask me, here, what's a distillation of what he's about, what his star persona is, I'd probably show him Rocky Balboa, the 6th Rocky movie, the last one. Did you ever see that?
No, I haven't seen the new ones. No.
I would. It's not so much new. He made it in 2007, I believe.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
But back then he was still old, and it was sort of the joke of, oh, he's too old to fight. But it's going to be one of the most inspirational movies, inspirational popular films, I think, that are out there. I would recommend you checking it out. It's almost sort of like a personal thesis from him. There's a lot of monologuing, where he chastises a court that's supposed to, it's like a boxing court that's supposed to, decide your fitness to fight in the league or whatever. And he goes on a big rant about how, people need to be able to make their own choices for themselves and what's best for their lives. And they can't let, government functionaries stand in the way of that or make decisions for them. And he's got a great monologue he delivers to his son about not blaming others for your own failures, which is just, I think, gold. So I think you'd like it. But do you have a favorite Sylvester Stallone movie? Do you like the Rocky films?
I mean, this is my favorite Sylvester Stallone film, really. I watched the Rambo movies, and I watched, I think, the first 2 Rockies. I've never seen the one with the robot in it. So whatever that one was, I haven't seen that.
Rocky 4?
Yeah, I've never seen it. Sorry, never seen that one.
But Sandra Bullock, this is my favorite performance of hers ever.
Yeah, I can't. She's been a famous actress for a long time, but it's like I couldn't nail down. We're talking about the aesthetics of the movie, and I'll try to be nice. Like there's an aspect of like, and people criticize the movie for this. Like some of the delivery from the other actors who aren't Stallone is kind of like can be stilted and weird, but that works in the movie because they're stilted and weird people, right? Like they're supposed to be strange people who listen to commercial jingles and whatever, and like so I think that she puts in a decent role here. Like she's bored with the world, and it's very obvious, and she wants to cut loose. I think that she did a good job. But although apparently when I was looking up stuff for this podcast, apparently they gave her a Razzie for this. They said she did the worst performance of '93. That was confusing to me. I don't know, like. Yeah, it seemed like she did a fine job.
That's very bizarre. I think it's actually probably kind of a tough role to play.
Yeah.
So yeah, that seems totally. I think that comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of what the movie was trying to be when people initially saw it in the early '90s, where they were thinking they were going into it thinking this is going to be a Stallone action vehicle. And then they came out of it saying, well, this failed as, a Stallone action vehicle. So therefore Razzie. And it's like, well, it's not what it's trying to do. The movie was directed by a guy who's only made like 2 other films. And for the most part, he's a museum installation artist.
Like a modern art guy?
Like a modern art guy. Like you go see his goofy art like in, the MoMA or whatever and stand there and kind of, be confused about what you're looking at.
Man, that's actually a perfect decision for a movie where like everything has to be like, you imagine a world where like the entire city of LA is a modern art museum. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think maybe because that surprised me at first because I was like, this is an incredibly like straightforward narrative movie that's really not abstract really in any way. Except for there's that sequence when they are having sex with the headset where we get like a strobe light montage of Sandra Bullock, which I think is sort of like a modern art installation, right?
Yeah, it's weird. Like it's her intercut with a body double who's like naked, and
yeah,
like that was back in the day. Like that was towards the tail end. If you remember movies in like the 80s, every movie had one topless scene because I guess you were allowed to have that without getting an R rating or whatever. You could just, or maybe it was with R rating. You could just throw in a pair of titties in every movie. Like every movie you watch just had this scene completely unnecessarily where it happens. And I guess that was like the very end of that. So there's like if you freeze on the right spot, and I know this because like I said, I had the VHS as a kid. There was a nipple if you pause the button at the exact right time.
Well, there's also that bit, too, where Stallone is messing with the TV and all of a sudden a naked woman calls
Yes! It's the wrong number, lady.
Hi, Martin. I was thinking. Oh, my God, I'm sorry. Wrong number.
Have you seen Robocop?
Oh, hell yeah. I've seen the, I think all 3 of those, and even though the last 2 were bad.
Oh, bad. Yeah, I stopped at 2 because 2 is fairly weak. There's something special about 1 that I think comes from the fact that like Paul Verhoeven was like a crazy German guy who just, sort of, they kind of wrote him a blank check. And
he said he called it American Jesus, right? I'm telling the story of American Jesus, and American Jesus would have a gun. Like there was such a funny line. I love Verhoeven because like he's a great director, obviously. I'm sure you've seen Starship Troopers.
Oh yeah.
I watched that movie in the we cut school and went to see that movie in the empty movie theater, and we were just like teenage boys, just like yelling at the screen. We loved it, and it was funny because like he made that movie as like a critique of fascism, but he just made fascism look awesome. Like, yeah, but like this is well, if we're just talking about film in general, I might have mentioned this before on a podcast. I'm not sure if I did or not. Like this is a problem with creative types in general, like. Every time they try to make a war movie, like the Apocalypse Now is supposed to be, you're supposed to go out of that thinking, wow, war's horrible. But that's not what happens. You got thinking, that's badass. I want to be Martin Sheen. I want to get, I want to surf with Charlie and all this stuff. Because they don't, for all their good aspects, like Paul Verhoeven is like, this is mean, but whatever. I'll be bombastic. It's your show. They are not connected to humanity properly. They don't understand, like, he doesn't understand why Robocop is based, right? He doesn't understand why that's good. He doesn't understand why Starship Troopers is based. This came up recently because when DeSantis was talking about making former military people into teachers. He wanted to get those people in there, and they're like, oh, that was an aspect of Starship Troopers explicitly fascist. It's like, if you watch the damn movie, the teacher the history teacher who played by Michael Ironside in that movie, he's a great teacher. He teaches those kids about like war, civic responsibility, about duty. He everything. He does it perfectly. He's a wonderful teacher. If that's your example of fascism, you got a real problem because like basically you don't like good stuff at that point.
That's a great point. And I didn't bring up RoboCop just to kind of like, because I had nowhere else to go, lest my interview skills be besmirched. But I brought it up because I think it would make a good double feature with this movie. But set that aside, because that was exactly the point I was going to make, is that I just recently bought the Arrow Video Blu-ray of Robocop and rewatched it, and I was like, this is a fucking great movie. And then I watch all the special features, and it's everybody saying, oh, this was supposed to be a critique of like Reagan's America. And I'm like, really? Like, okay, why? Because there's some goofy television bits spliced in. Is that like consumerism? Is that kind of your thing? Because yeah, for the most part, I don't think any regular person can come out of that movie thinking, now, obviously, I think you could critique the idea of the exploitation of the working man, i.e., the main character being sort of like resurrected from the dead and cobbled into this robot machine. And I especially like the sequence in Robocop where they're putting him online and he's flipping in and out of consciousness while they're screwing with his body. And then he flips his eyes back on and they're having like a New Year's Eve party while his like his body's just sitting there.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. But for the most part, yeah, I think the regular person would come out of this thinking, yeah, absolutely what this society does need is a Robocop to go around and just sort of be the Judge Dredd executioner guy. You know, your move creep. I mean, it's like...
That was their anxiety. I'm just speculating, like, you're talking about the features, and you see, like, these Hollywood people talking about this movie they're making. This is, we're gonna get the Reaganites. Their fear at that time was that we were at that very moment in the mid and late 80s. There was like a change in law enforcement doctrine in America, because if you know what happened in the 60s and 70s when it comes to crime and social unrest, it was not great times. And no. They changed the doctrine, and like actually, this came up in the 2016 Democratic primary, which maybe a lot of people don't remember, but I do. An attack against Hillary Clinton was that her husband and she supported the crime bill, and the crime bill was like the tail end, like was really the tail end of this movement. But it was like, okay, we have an idea for how we're going to solve violent crime. We're going to throw these people in prison forever, like the 3 strikes law, and ideas like that. Were okay if we put somebody in jail for a very long time for committing, multiple minor crimes, they won't commit big crimes, and crime will go down. Like that's a very basic retelling of it. But
sure.
They saw this coming in the 80s. Like this is where we were headed. There was a backlash against the social changes of the 60s, and people were tired of it, and they wanted Robocop to go into Detroit and just start shooting rapists in the dick with his robot gun. Like that's
Absolutely.
What they wanted. Charles Bronson's Death Wish, I don't think you were supposed to come out of that thinking that was a good idea, but that's the idea that literally everybody who left the movie thought, like, man, I wish there was a guy on the subway just blasting people with his revolver.
100%. And I think you're right. Like, no one walked out of RoboCop and was like, we got to make sure that never happens, right? That there's never a robot. No, they fucking couldn't wait, right?
We need better oversight of the police department so this doesn't happen.
Yeah. I remember actually, such a sort of aside, I did a video. I do a lot of commercial video work. I did a TV ad for the local Boys and Girls Club in where I live. And great organization, by the way, really good people. And they had but the reason I brought this up is that I walked through their like hallway of all these photographs. They had a photograph from a Washington, D.C. fundraiser for the National Boys and Girls Club from like 1994. And they had a guy in a RoboCop costume at the event, like promoting the Boys and Girls Club of America. And he was in a photo with Richard Nixon. And I it's the most amazing photograph, and it's online. You can find it. Spectacular stuff. But yeah, I think you're right. Go ahead.
It's amazing. That meme of like there's the guy in the clouds saying, "You watch the hood, I'll watch the skies." It's like Nixon's up in the clouds and RoboCop's down in the streets, just absolutely blasting away at murderers.
Right. But I mean, I am a comic book guy, and I think about like a character like the Punisher, who was huge also at this time, right? In the 80s and 90s, and now they have no idea what to do with him, right? They're like, he's such a popular IP, but you know.
Can I do a little rant about the Punisher?
Please.
I won't go along with it. So
no, go ahead.
I don't like Marvel stuff really, but I did watch the Punisher parts of that Daredevil TV show, and then I watched the first season of the Punisher because it's fun. And you saw the second season, right, of the Punisher show? Did you see it?
I did not watch the Punisher show. I watched the Daredevil season 2 when he was the guest villain or whatever. I remember that, and it was just constant soliloquizing about whether or not it's right to murder villains or whatever. Right.
Well, they let him go buck wild in his own show, and like there's still stuff, but like he's blasting people away, whatever. But they had a real problem, is that after the first season, the same thing I talked about before happened. Like, he became a meme for. He is still a meme for right wing people. Like, the cops have Punisher logos on their stuff. People loved it. People like me liked that show too much, and so the second season, they changed the show to like the big bad guys were again kind of like the boys. Like, they were explicitly Christian nationalist people who were like, I'm not even sure what they did. Like, their real crime is like they're really religious, conservative people, and there's like an alt-right backlash in the show, and the Punisher has to like, I'm gonna kill the alt-right people because they're not real. It's just and that was the end of the show because everybody watched it, and I imagine they had the same reaction I was, which is like, this is really fucking lame. Like, this you've neutered the Punisher, but they had to do that. And like, and that's just that this is a problem they will continue to have.
This is a problem. I mean, maybe it's not even a modern one. This is Dirty Harry 2, Magnum Force. If you've ever seen that, Magnum Force is, everyone critiqued Dirty Harry, the first one. They're like, you're glorifying this renegade cop. So in the second movie, which is not great, they have like David Soul and like 2 other guys are renegade cops who are just wantonly murdering everybody.
The evil cops,
And Dirty Harry, well, I can't abide that. You're not following, habeas corpus or whatever, Miranda rights, right? So they had to turn it into like actually Clint Eastwood is pro, bureaucracy and being by the book, right?
Walking Tall too, where he's got to help the hippie commune fight against the police.
Yeah. Or I mean, like Billy Jack is kind of like that. If you've ever seen Billy Jack, it's like harnessing that archetype to like be the left wing, Punisher, right?
It never works. It just never works.
So, I mean, I guess you could argue this happened with Lethal Weapon 2, right? Who are the villains in Lethal Weapon 2? It's like the South American apartheid government or whatever.
In the South, the apartheid Afrikaans guy,
yeah. And you have Mel Gibson being like ridiculing them for thinking that they're the master race or whatever, and you're just thinking the whole time, God, I wonder what Mel Gibson thought when he read this script. I wonder if he was right. I wonder if he was on board, or not. Like,
I thought that was the peak of Hollywood cringe back in the day, but they proved they could go much much further with than we ever believed.
In a globalist movie economy where you're trying to sell to everybody, it's kind of like in the last Pierce Brosnan film, which who are like the big megalomaniacal villains. It's like North Korea, as if they pose some kind of global threat, but they're the only people that can't get tickets, so might as well, right?
Or they've had to do that in the past because of partnerships. Like, I remember they remade a Red Dawn movie that was terrible, and like it was going to be China, but China was too important to the box office of international movies now, so they remade like North Korea invades Iowa. It's like
yeah, okay. Did you ever see that documentary on John Milius? He directed Red Dawn, Conan, wrote Apocalypse Now.
No, I should though, because his daughter is on Twitter a lot and she goes buck wild.
Yeah.
I love Conan and I've seen Red Dawn many times. Although I watched it again as like a grown man, and it was like, it wasn't as good as I remember when I was a teenage boy. But that's just old age probably.
Sure. But yeah, he was an interesting filmmaker who, I mean, my favorite anecdote about him is that, Martin Sheen's narration in Apocalypse Now, right?
Yeah.
Coppola didn't think he was getting it. And Milius just happened to be there and just like pulled out a loaded gun and handed it to Martin Sheen and had him hold it the whole time. And apparently that's how they got the performance that Coppola thought worked.
It's funny. I read, I can't remember what book it was, but like Milius said this about Coppola, that Coppola didn't understand the movie he was making, and that Coppola thinks everything's fascism, and he just couldn't understand. He couldn't understand. He wasn't the right person to. I mean, he was the right person to make the movie in one sense, but like he definitely didn't know what he had. Right? He kind of actually the exact critique that I just made. Maybe that's where I ripped it off from. Like that's what I love about about Mealy. It's like we actually talked to somebody, Brian Chow, the other day, or not the other day, a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
He had never seen Conan the movie.
That blew my mind when he didn't know what you were talking about. I was like, what? When you guys asked him if he'd seen Conan and he didn't know what it was.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of perfunctory, too. I was just going to simply say, yeah, but he had seen it. There was a point that I made there. I figured I'd talk to you about it just briefly, since this is your thing. You know, everybody quotes the Conan line about how, like, the best thing in life is to kill your enemies and, you know, take their women and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But Conan never does this in the movie ever. You never see him being a bad guy. In fact, he's getting revenge on completely evil people. And like if you've seen the the Conan stories, the Howard's original stories, Conan's like not always the brightest guy, but he's not evil. And it's just funny that like the idea of Conan as Genghis Khan, but he's not portrayed that way. He's portrayed like a pretty typical hero, isn't he?
In the movie?
Yeah. Like, I mean, he's a good guy in the movie. He's not,
in the comics, and I've only read, I think, one of the books like back when I was in high school, but I know in the comics and stuff, he's portrayed as like, kind of like Clint Eastwood in the Man with No Name movies. He's not a bad guy, but he's basically out for himself. He's always like after jewels, you know, that's something that I don't think they touched on too much in the films, is that Conan's like MO is to just like get jewels and then blow the money on getting drunk and like having, you know, getting all the right? And he kind of like stumbles into amazing adventures, right? Like, oh, I got to kill this giant serpent and stuff.
Well, now the comics, like the comic book itself was separate from Howard, right? They were based on Howard. Yeah, okay. I've never read I'm not a comic guy. I've never read those. I know in the story, like he one time he has a girlfriend, the pirate lady, and she gets killed by the evil bird monster. And like that's the one time where like Conan's like, I will avenge my evil pirate girlfriend.
Kind of like Bond, where he gets married once, and that's, you know, to Majesty's Secret Service.
Yeah, her job is to die so he can avenge her.
Her job is to die, so so he can have vengeance or whatever. But no, I think I would just defend the Conan comics here, in that like they are sort of like a seminal part of the Conan mythology, I think, because first of all, John Buscema, who draws them, is like one of the most spectacular artists of the 70s, very much in like the Frank Frazetta vein, and that like Roy Thomas and him, like their tenure on the book was like they wrote it for like 10 years. So it was like super consistent and long running and pretty cool. And part of what brought Conan back and made him popular enough to get a movie in the 30s. So,
it wasn't based off the pulp serial novels of the 30s. Like, you don't make a movie about that 50. Well, they would now. Yeah. Like they're so desperate to comb through everything. Oh. That's like a point that, you know, when George Lucas made Star Wars, like he ripped. Bog and I talked about this privately quite a bit. Like, he ripped off a lot of like pulp stuff, like Flash Gordon, whatever. But like he made his own story. He made his own IP. Like that, and that would not happen today. Like they made a movie series about Ant-Man, and like, you know, I know people like maybe Ant-Man is a great comic book. I don't know, but like the only thing I knew about Ant-Man was there's the original Saturday Night Live had an episode where the superheroes have you seen this? Yeah. Where they have a dinner party and like Ant-Man shows up and everybody's just making fun of Ant-Man for being so fucking lame. Like, oh, your power is you turn tiny and you can tell ants what to do. That's awesome. You must be the coolest super. But no, like there's now, they'll put out another Ant-Man movie and it'll make $500 million, and that's insane. And like it shocks me that they made the movie with Guardians of the Galaxy, which, by the way, I saw that movie and I liked it. So I'm not saying it's a bad movie, but it's got a fucking talking raccoon in it. And they said, you know what, this will make $1 billion if they put that. I don't know. It's completely wacky.
I was a fan of the Marvel movies really initially on because like as a comic book guy, like in 2000 and when I was growing up, I was born when this movie came out, by the way, Demolition Man, if that gives you any idea. But like I was reading comics in like 2004 when I was like in 5th grade or whatever. And to see all these wacky characters that were cool in the comics that I liked be on the screen was really thrilling. Like in 2013, 14, because you would go on the internet and they'd be like, there's no way they're ever going to make a movie about Captain America, who by the way is my favorite character. Right. And they made like 5 of them, So initially as like a nerd, you were kind of like, wow, like they really are going buck wild, to appropriate your phrase, which I like and I'm starting to say. Like you're like, check it out. Like these guys are doing crazy shit, like having a talking raccoon, and it's working and making $1 billion, right? Now I think the culture has it now. The culture has Marvel, and they've kind of ruined it.
Yeah.
And it's going downhill quickly.
This is great. This is something that I've wanted to talk about before, but I couldn't because I don't know enough about it. I will interrogate you on this. You say Captain America is your favorite from the comic book. I assume you mean, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And like they made like a Captain America movie in the 80s that was terrible. It was like, was it Dolph Lundgren? Someone like that.
The actor is actually J.D. Salinger, the guy who wrote Catcher in the Rye. His son played Captain America. His son was an actor.
What?
Yes.
That's insane. All right, I didn't know
his
that.
Son. Yeah. Handsome kid.
Well, Okay, you love Captain America. You saw the first Captain America movie. You liked it, right?
Yeah, I did.
The with Chris Evans. I saw that movie and I liked it too. And it came out in 2010, something like that. There's that scene where the best scene in that movie is the easy one. It's when Tommy Lee Jones is talking to the good Nazi doctor, and he says, you can't win a war with someone like this. He's a pipsqueak, and he throws the dummy grenade, and Chris Evans immediately jumps on the grenade to kill himself, like to save everybody else. And I like that scene. And here's the thing: when I circuitously trying to get around to ask you about, you couldn't make Captain America in 2022. You couldn't do it because I mean they're going to make another one, but it's going to be like this is. I think the tagline was, "America's a complicated history" or whatever. You can't just be Captain America in 2022. That movie was like,
no, you can't.
If that movie would be called Right Wing today, and that was 12 years ago. It wasn't. That's why they killed off Iron Man, and Captain America is gone now. Like those were the characters that people liked at that time in the early 2010s.
Yeah, it's amazing how much it's shifted. Yeah, it's shifted where they've sort of, and I think one of the things I think they did well with Captain America that I liked, and though I'm not a big fan of Chris Evans' Twitter account, like I thought that he did right by the character. I think he did a fine job, and I think especially with like the Thor character and a lot of the other characters, everybody saw that Robert Downey Jr. got all the laughs, right? And they were like, well, I want my character to be like him. So everyone became like a snark machine with like funny jokes all the time, right? Which I think has been a downfall. They did a good job keeping that Steve Rogers character of Captain America like fairly, I don't want to say stoic because that sounds like he's boring, but they kept him like very much upright and moral. And he plays the libertarian role in the second and third movie where he is against the government surveillance and government overreach in both those films, right? Which is like interesting. But yeah, I mean, they'd have the sort of new Captain America, which is his sidekick Falcon, right? Who's black. And at the end of the final, like the Endgame movie, old Captain America, who is gone, he went into the future and became old and looks like Joe Biden, right? But he hands the shield over to Falcon and goes, "Hey, you're taking up the mantle, right?" And I was like, okay, that's good. That's a positive thing. Like that seems like a good deal. Cause I still have a little bit of like kumbaya in me deep down. Right. And I'm like, okay, that's a positive thing. I'm glad to see that. Right. And rather than just rolling with the idea of like, okay, Captain America's black now, he's Falcon. Let's go do a new Captain America story. They made the introduction of the Falcon Captain America. It was all about him wrestling with the idea of being Captain America and being black, because that's a very tough decision to make. Yes. And I thought that was like really sort of sad, like,
That defeats the whole point of Captain America. Is like he doesn't care if you're white or black. He's all green. It's all about the way the military says it's green. We're both green. You were in the army. I was in the army. We're both Americans. To do that, I didn't see the Endgame movie, but somebody did show me the scene where like Captain America decides he doesn't want any more of the 21st century, and he goes back in time and hooks up with this big busty British spy girlfriend, right?
Yes.
Great decision.
Great decision and a great ending. Yeah.
She was. I mean, she still is. I assume extremely beautiful, classic Hollywood. You know where I'm going with that.
Total 100%. Yeah, and that's how they ended basically like with that movie Endgame, they sort of ended the whole series really, because nothing after that, it just seems anticlimactic. But to end that whole series of all those films on him dancing with her alone in their house, like him having gone back to the past to seek solace, right? I think that was it was brilliant. And it's all done now, right? They can't do that anymore. So
I mean, I have a friend who loves Marvel movies. He explicitly says, if Marvel puts out a movie about whatever, he's gonna go see it. He's gonna go see the She-Hulk movie or whatever. Like he's just gonna watch it. And I mean I get that, sort of. I've been that way about certain things, but like I can't identify with it. And I assumed when they did that, when they ended that movie, ended the series where they got rid of the two most popular characters, that maybe they were going to do something else, but no, they're just going to like go into the backlog of everything that Jack Kirby ever did, like in the 20th century, and they're going to make a movie out of it till people stop going to see it, and which may be never. I don't know.
It might be never, and I wonder about that. But they're kind of losing me, and I've been a Star Wars fan forever, and I had a conversation with my brother about the newest show they did, the Obi-Wan show. And he's like, he goes, I don't know why they're not making this stuff for us anymore. They're making this for some other alternative Star Wars fan that doesn't exist, that they would prefer existed. They don't like us anymore, even though we're the guys with disposable income to buy all the fucking shit, right? But they would rather have a different customer.
Yeah, I mean, I loved Star Wars. I watched the first prequel in theaters. I was old enough to do that, and it was like, man, this is terrible. But I went to see the second one again because like I love Star Wars. I don't think I've actually seen the third one, but I don't think I was missing much. I went to watch the first new Star Wars movie when that came out, and it was just like, okay, you're just remaking Star Wars with an inferior cast. I got checked out after that, and like now they're making $1 billion. There's a TV show about Boba Fett, and maybe Jabba will get his own series now.
Just
you nailed it with the thing. Yeah. They don't like their audience, and that's the thing. Like, no. And my theory about this is purely the people who work in the head offices of every corporation. They're exactly the same. Whether it's NASCAR, the NFL, or Marvel Studios, it's all the same kind of people, and they're gearing everything towards like getting their message out. And like that's fine if you're writing YA novels or whatever, but it's not if you're making like the Punisher TV show. You probably shouldn't do that because the people who are actually going to watch your television show aren't going to like it, and the people who would like it, they're never going to watch it to begin with. But I guess they have to keep learning this lesson over and over again. And maybe now that cheap money might be going away, you won't be so freely loaning money because of the economic downturn. Maybe they'll have to stop doing that. But I don't know. They don't care. They won't. If it bankrupted, like how many bad Star Trek TV shows will they have to make before like Paramount goes bankrupt? I don't know, but we'll find out.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. I had a great time speaking with Maarek. And remember, within the next few days, the entirety of the interview will be released in audio form on my new podcast, which you can find in the link below. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.